To the next in a series of BC Support Unit webinars. My name is Pat Atherton and I represent the BC Support Unit and I'm responsible for training and capacity development. Today I'm delighted to introduce Dan Goldowitz, who is the Child Bright Network Co-Coordinator, and Pierre Zwiegers, the Child Bright Training Coordinator, who are going to present an overview of their network and its ongoing activities. Before we get underway, I'd like to begin the webinar by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations from whose traditional lands we are leading this webinar today. You may have noticed that we've muted you as you've joined the webinar to avoid background noise during the presentation, and we encourage you to use the chat box to share questions for a discussion at the end of the presentation. The chat box can be found in the top right area of your screen. At the end of the presentation, all microphones will be unmuted, so you can ask your question using your microphone, or you can use that chat, whichever you prefer. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website, which is located at www.bcsupportunit.ca under Resources, so you can share it with your friends and colleagues. After the webinar, you can expect to hear from us about future webinars that are coming up in our series. And with that final bit of housekeeping, over to you, Dan and Pierre, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Pat. This is a pleasure to do this. I guess we're the first of the BC-based SPORs and SPORs to do this, so we'd love feedback and comments. But let me jump in. So we have our an application into the CIHR to create a patient-oriented research entity that focused on brain-based disabilities, otherwise known as Child Bright. And we got word for funding about a year and a half ago, but it was a long road to get to that funding situation. First, we had to align a series of sponsors, funders, folks who would put skin in the game, so to speak, to match CIHR's $12.5 million. We needed to raise $12.5 for the 5-year effort that we wanted to undertake. And these are some of the really generous funding partners that aligned to join us in this exciting effort. So then I'll go into sort of describing what this exciting effort has been. I think pretty much everyone has an idea who's on or this virtual meeting of what patient-oriented research is. But from our perspective, we take it very seriously, and key points are to engage patients as partners at the beginning of our efforts, and they set the priorities of what's most meaningful to them, and they ultimately have their ideas for what outcomes should be. And so we formed as a very key component an IKT group, which will work with partners and other supporters to get things going. And this is sort of shown the team that puts us together, that we live and die off of feedback, and this presentation will be no different. So I'd like us to move forward to introduce the team as the part of the teamwork, and there's 3 co-PIs, Annette Maynemer at McGill in Montreal, Stephen Miller at Sick Kids in Toronto, and myself at UBC. And we've pretty much divvied up the roles. Annette has taken the lead role in terms of our governance, our management, and she's also responsible for the knowledge translation component of our network. Stephen his responsibility is oversight of the research effort, and myself is in training. So we'll sort of relay each of those entities to you in due course. So, but first of all, what Child Bright looks like. And We have a series of principal investigators who lead 12 different research projects. All together, in terms of our stakeholders, we have about 160 co-applicants that put their names on the proposal and put themselves out there to work hard to get this funded. We have, as showed you in our second slide, 37 collaborators, funders, co-funders, largely child health organizations, and the funding partners that you also saw. So our vision is shown here at the bottom of the slide: achieving brighter futures for children with developmental disabilities and their families across the life course, and by promoting healthy outcomes through optimizing brain development, creative, novel interventions, and providing responsive and supportive services. So that, in a nutshell, is our vision, and we are going to attain that vision with a couple of approaches that we've decided to take. So first is the idea about a diagnosis and identifying high-risk populations that need to have approaches. So for the diagnosis, we're talking about, for example, autism, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, and so on. And at risk are populations such as kids who have extremely premature birth, congenital heart defects, stroke, and so on. And so the idea is creating a coalition between these individuals who have experienced these developmental disabilities and their families, together with our researchers and the community. So this is the target population. Just give you some ideas of the incidence of brain-based disabilities. For example, 1 in 10 kids are born premature, and these kids have an increased demands on their brain such that oftentimes this group has neurodevelopmental disabilities associated with prematurity. 1 in 20 kids have developmental disabilities such as brain-based issues to do with learning and so on. And 1 in 13 kids have things like dyslexia and learning disabilities. 1 in 68 kids, this is based on our most recent numbers, have autism spectrum disorder and so on. So this is quite a burden to the families, to society, and to the healthcare system. So to challenge ourselves and put forth some goals that we want to attain, we've adopted this triple aim framework, which is better health, better healthcare, and better value. And the bullet points below in this slide really are our major objectives to align with this triple aim. That is, improve child health and development, to enhance the patient and family experience for access to care, coordination of care, and these ultimately read out as cost-effective strategies. So a summary of what our programs are and that we've put together is at the top of this sort of circle around the developing brain is our patient-oriented research. And you'll see 12 of the projects that we've initially funded and are rolling out. We also have a patient-oriented training that Pierre will talk about that we're very proud of. We have citizen engagement that has really done an incredible job of getting the community to be involved in Child Bright and with Child Bright. And we just had our first conference. It was really a quite wonderful success where the citizen engagement was quite remarkable, and sharing stories and talking, having discussions with the researchers and the families. and then knowledge translation, again, which Pierre will talk about in just a bit. And then we have two key aspects that are wraparounds of our whole project. One is the Data Coordinating Center, and this is located in Alberta. And this is collecting data from all the different trials and even from our surveys and so on. And this is run by Lawrence Richer and his group out of Edmonton. And so it's sort of an informatics data coordinating center. And then further south in Alberta, that is in Calgary, Jen Zwiegers, and then over to Sick Kids, we have co-leads for this health economic service, which really provides the third part of the triple aim framework, that is to look at the cost-effective strategies and how, if we should roll out the kind of things that we're doing at Kids Brain Health Network. I'm sorry, at ChildBright. I'm getting confused here. So first of all is our patient-oriented research, and we have three themes. The first is a focus is very on early development, and it focuses on brain plasticity to look at setting the course for a developmental trajectory on the best pathway going forward. The second is more youth and adolescent based, which focuses on child and family involvement, and that focuses mental health. And the third is to optimize the experience within the Canadian healthcare system. And so the projects I'll briefly introduce to you fall into these three realms, and it's the IKT that really we bring to fore to empower children and families for brighter futures. So without further ado, we'll go into theme one, which is named Bright Beginnings. And this is optimizing brain and developmental outcomes. And we've got 5 projects under that heading, and they're listed here to the left, all focusing on issues with early brain development. So one way that to treat early problems such as stroke or cerebral palsy is for maternal oxygen. And there, Stephen Miller and Mike Seeds are leading that program. A second issue that has to do with prematurity is a project being led by Ann Sinnis here at UBC, at Children and Women's, on patient-centered evidence-based care for premature graduates. And they have this really incredible database called CN Fund that is accumulation of a large set of individuals who have sort of graduated, as they say, from the prematurity from the NICU, the intensive care units, and they're following up and they're finding the best evidence to support care of this population that is increasing in nature because of our ability to take care of kids in the NICU. They're living longer, and we're going to have more and more graduates. So, and Dr. Shaw's efforts in this regard are very important. Then the third is enhancing brain repair. And this is with an agent, a pharmaceutical, that was shown to have impact in diabetes, is very well tolerated, and has been tried out as a plasticity-inducing agent in the nervous system. And this project, run by Don Mabit and Darcy Failings out of the University of Toronto and Holland Bloorview in Ontario, is a clinical trial using metformin to enhance plasticity. This is an exciting effort, and they're running the trial as we speak. Then the fourth one is one run by Adam Curtin out of Calgary, and it's using a non-invasive stimulation, a transcranial stimulation that really can move to improve brain function. It's been used in lots of disorders, but the one that Adam has pioneered is in kids with stroke and early diagnosis of cerebral palsy. And finally, a fifth project is using modern age metabolomics and genomics to ask questions about neural development. And Jan Friedman and Clara von Karnevik out of UBC are leading this project, and their sample population is kids with cerebral palsy by and large. And what they've building on is a finding that they're based on genetic sequencing of individuals with the clinical diagnosis of cerebral palsy, which is sort of a catch-all, that they find that the genome harbors many different disorders, and that each individual child diagnosed under this umbrella of cerebral palsy has quite different disorders that needs to be dealt with in a very personalized way. And this is really at the heart of a strategy for patient-oriented research. Theme 2 is Bright Supports. This is an exciting group of 4 projects that move to support mental health and best care. And the first project, which is out of UBC again and run by Hal Seiden and Tim Oberlander, is all about pain, which is a constant comorbidity in kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities, and how to optimize the management of that pain. The second one is Strongest Families. It's a neurodevelopmental program led by Pat McGraw out of IWK at Dalhousie and Lucy Locke out of social work at McGill. And that's really an online program to work with parents and families to diffuse issues that can arise and disintegrate family settings relative to mental health. They've had a lot of they had this program actually, Strongest Families in BC. They run Strongest Families for kids with FASD and for First Nations, and in every setting they've shown quite beneficial results. So we're excited about including that project also. The JUA app is number 3, and this is a very cool thing. It's largely out of McGill and Dr. Chicago Thomas, and she's been creating an app on your phone to be able to dial in wherever you are across Canada and find disability-friendly areas to exercise, to engage in physical activities. Because this is a really important thing in the disabled world, world of kids with disabilities, is how they're on the outside looking in when it comes to physical activity in many respects. But physical activity is hugely important for brain development. And so Chicago Thomas, Keiko, has been building this JUA app to really enhance possibilities for physical activity and hence mental health for these kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities. And finally, we have the 4th project. This is being led by Jennifer Crosby on treatments to improve emotional and behavioral self-regulation, 2 issues that are really important for mental health that is challenged. It receives huge challenges for kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities. The 3rd theme is really looking forward in life, and that is bright futures. How the healthcare system can be far more responsive to family needs. And here we have 3 projects that span the life spectrum and really illustrates our approach really nicely. It starts out from transitioning from the neonatal intensive care unit, and that's project 1, the coach coordinated enhanced neonatal transition, and that's led by E.L. Cohen at Sick Kids, but also Julia Orkin and Natalie Major Cook. And what they are working is putting together a team approach to work with the special issues that extreme prematurity presents and move these families and kids, neonates, into a transition into what would be, for most people, postnatal care, and how to navigate this particularly stressful time, and a time that needs to be handled well for long-term benefits. And the second program is Bright Coaching, a health coach system to empower families of preschoolers with developmental delays. And that's being led by our own Maureen O'Donnell out of UBC and Annette May-Niemer, who you've met, who is our lead for the Child Bright. And this is really navigating the healthcare system in a way that Maureen and Annette have done really nicely in Montreal and British Columbia, and to bring it across Canada. And thirdly is the Ready or Not program, moving ahead with transition of care from adolescence to adulthood. And this takes the third tranche of individuals that has us going from the NICU to adolescence and now to kids moving into adult care. And this is being led by Ariana Morelli out of McGill, Jean-Willem Gorder out of McMaster, and Knush Amaria. And this really is that to deal with that key juncture in time where the child leaves pediatric care and now is out into the world, where there's a whole host of new challenges. The adult neurologist, whether one gets vocational training, lands a job, living at home. So all of these issues, and the Ready or Not terminology is totally poignant and important there. And this just gives you an idea from, if we think about pathways that we travel and cars on the road, do we go from study design, which is the setup, and the peer review, where we get input from parents and families, to then get the research project going. All 12 of these are what's called RCTs, and so they have a whole set of criterion ahead of them, including hiring, which is our next circle in the road, then to the plan set up for data analysis and hosting and storage, to getting ethics approval. It's actually critical. And you'll see one of our 12 projects is at this early stage. Two of our projects are moving forward onto conducting the study, which first starts with patient recruitment, okay? And there we are along the road. In some of these cases, we actually are running pilot studies just to make sure that when we unveil the full study, we're ready for the trials and tribulations that we might face at that point of view. And then we move to full bore patient participant recruitment. And there you can see 4 of our projects are moving into that, or currently recruiting. And then finally, 2 of our projects are actually collecting data, and that will move forward in terms of monitoring and interim analyses. And then, very importantly, not the end of the road, but frankly the beginning of the road, is integrated knowledge translation and moving that information out to the public, to policymakers, and to other researchers. So with that in mind, let me turn it over to Pierre, who is going to tell you about the other things that Child Bright is very keen about and investing a lot of time and energy. So Pierre?
Thank you, Dan. So I will just briefly give you all an overview of the other three sort of cornerstones of the Childguide Network. So the first one we have up for consideration is the patient-oriented training program that we are developing. And so we have set up this amazing training committee, which consists of members from across different stakeholder groups, which include healthcare providers, researchers, patients, as well as some lay community members. And ultimately, regular meetings between this group aim to develop the network's overarching training strategy, which ultimately is designed to further promote this idea of patient-oriented research and how to do this kind of research well. So essentially, as a part of the training core, what do we do? We're ultimately tasked with providing training opportunities to a variety of stakeholder groups, and this include not only healthcare providers and professionals, but patients and families who are interested and becoming involved in various research projects. And so these training opportunities that we do work on are designed to not only lay the groundwork for what patient-oriented research is, but delineates how this differentiates from traditional health research and relays practical strategies for how one can actually more effectively contribute to a research project if you are a community stakeholder. So what have we done? For the last year and a half, the training core has started gathering some steam, and for the vast majority of that time, our major focus was on aiding in the piloting of the CIHR's foundational curriculum in patient-oriented research. So we were fortunate enough to participate in that activity last year and ultimately provide some input on the re-envisioned curriculum that has just recently launched again. So we look forward to continuing on and building off of that material for our particular group. Since one of the major sort of issues that we found out as we were delivering it is that we were in desperate need for something that was more focused on the pediatric population. So in order for us to kind of make that a reality, we had established these rather great collaborations with specifically with the BC Support Unit and the Canadian Clinician Child Health Science Program to deliver or develop these online training modules that are designed to forward patient-oriented research training, but do so with a pediatric focus. And we've also been able to gain some really crucial input on what a training strategy looks like aimed at a younger population by our work with KidsCan, where we were able to work with their advisors who are trained to actively provide input on research projects and bringing that youth focus to the researchers. And a new collaboration that we've been working on for the last few months is we've been engaging all of the other chronic disease SPORs. So we have the Diabetes Action Network, we have the CanSolve Chronic Kidney Disease Network, the Chronic Pain Network, and Imagine. And in collaborating with these groups, we are working to streamlining more of the training offerings to make sure that we aren't duplicating efforts and that what we put out there can be done in a more concerted and productive manner. So in the last year, we were also rather fortunate to launch our inaugural summer studentship training program, where we were able to support some of the Childguide research projects in hiring short-term summer students. So these were typically undergraduates who this would have been the first time they had gained experience on a research project. And in addition to providing them the opportunity to gain that practical experience on the research side of things, we had them participate in a training program that was delivered via webinar to sort of start laying the groundwork with this new cohort of researchers and just getting them well established in what patient-oriented research is and how patient engagement can better improve your research objectives. So what's next for us as a training committee? Well, we're currently working on launching a national training strategy that would be sort of based on our studentship offering from the previous year, where we will deliver various training modalities to this group. And again, just as a way to increase their awareness of what patient-oriented research is and how it can be incorporated. And so we're really excited that our initial offering for the studentship opportunity was so well received. We are launching our second opportunity this year, and we're currently in the stage of reviewing applications from various child rights projects. And I guess, as I had mentioned in the previous slide, we are working with the other chronic disease SPOR networks in coming up with strategies to more effectively relay various training opportunities. And in terms of some other stakeholder groups that we are targeting, we are currently working on developing a mentorship framework for our junior investigators to help further increase their capacity to participate in patient-oriented related research projects. And then again, I guess follow up to the studentship opportunities, we're working on figuring out what other training opportunities we can make available to undergraduates and junior graduate students that would help further increase their knowledge of the field. All right, so if we move on to the KT program, which is another integral platform of our network, it's set up in a rather unique way as well, where in addition to the co-chairs, the committee is made up of a number of researchers, patients, and family members who bring a rather unique perspective to all of the knowledge translation efforts that they are undertaking. So what are some of the activities that they do? So one is they host these knowledge translation events, which is ultimately there to not only establish the infrastructure for promoting knowledge translation, but sets up the stage to design the evaluation framework for knowledge translation so that you can more effectively gauge how well your KT activities are having an impact. In addition to the KT events, the program is very well set up to evaluate how CHILDRIGHT as a network can engage its stakeholders in research projects and ultimately promote research that looks to investigate best practices on how one can more effectively integrate knowledge translation and stakeholder engagement within provided research projects. So then the question leads to why have this new acronym? Why bother with something like integrated knowledge translation? Well, it is pivotal to this idea of patient-oriented research, where you engage your stakeholder groups across all stages of the project. So typically, as we might have seen in the past, you would engage your patient population at the end of your grant or of your project, when your ultimate goal was just to sort of raise awareness of the work that you had produced. Whereas with integrated knowledge translation, the goal here is to start that conversation from the start and have your stakeholder groups involved with not only setting up the research priorities, but guiding the questions and setting up the various strategies that you would use to collect your data, design your surveys, and have that critical stakeholder piece implemented right from the start and throughout the life of your research project. So in terms of advancing this idea of integrated knowledge translation, the Knowledge Translation Committee is working on promoting research projects that investigate the why, the why and the how of IKT, and how to better engage with your stakeholder groups within this area of patient-oriented research. So ultimately, that leads to a number of key research questions that are being asked. So how do we define when we have successful integrated knowledge translation? How do we even define IKT? How do we measure it? What sort of temporal scale do you place on measuring your success? Is it in the short term? Is it in the long term? And even larger than that, what do we consider as a success? Is it the number of products you produce? Is it the degree or the numbers of participants you have engaged in your project? And lastly, so as to not, I guess, do more work than you need to do, what are the additional tools that are out there, and how can it be done better? So in terms of practically how the KT program is advancing the science of integrated knowledge translation is through hosting a number of events. One is participating in webinars or arranging knowledge translation cafes where various groups can come together and drive the discussion. And of course, the design of research briefs where key knowledge can be disseminated. And really an exciting sort of initiative that the program has been involved in over the last few months is this innovation incubator that was launched at our annual meeting back in November. And so ultimately the opportunity was to provide this monetary incentive of $20,000 to an application that was focused on a knowledge translation activity. And as to the best of my knowledge, they just wrapped up their submission cycle, and they had received about 15 applications. So it'll be really exciting in the next month to see what project was funded and ultimately what the outcome of that project would be. And then lastly, another great activity that the KT program is involved in is this policy hub, where it is critical for us as a network to engage with policymakers to further advance the sort of uptake and impact of the work that we do. So in the policy hub that the KT program are designing, it's a strategy for us to better understand what sort of needs are out there in terms of policy, what sort of information is needed for us to create those policy briefs or those messages that go out to those policymakers to better gauge their input. And then lastly, of course, is to develop and test the evidence to policy interventions to make sure that what we are suggesting is something that can be applied and ultimately be effective in not only having a positive, more positive health outcome, but resulting in a more cost-effective and streamlined healthcare system. And our last pillar is the citizen engagement panel, the citizen engagement committee. And so this group is crucial in providing that key element from the community and reviewing and ultimately helping us gauge how well we are interacting, how well we are interacting with our community, and what can we do better. So when you hear the term patient engagement, it brings up a lot of questions. Who's the one that's initiating the engagement? Who decides what its purpose is? Who evaluates its success? Is that something that can be multi-directional? Is it something that is reciprocal? So ultimately, when you undertake a strategy like this, where you engage patients as equal partners in your project, there is the risk of this power imbalance not allowing dutiful and effective participation or engagement. So that is sort of, I guess, the main aspect of the Citizen Engagement Committee, and they're there to help steer the network's patient engagement strategies. So when you think of the term patient, that as well is a rather loaded term. Some do not prefer that to be referred to that way. Some would prefer the term client or member. And ultimately, many patients themselves don't really, many family members would not consider themselves as patients. Now, according to our funding agency, patients are more generally defined as anyone with an experience of a health issue, as well as their informal caregivers. But in Childbright, we include in that term patients, and we include the preterm babies, the younger children, the youth as they become adults, and ultimately their family members, their grandparents, and the surrounding community that are involved with their lives. But our stakeholder groups, of course, is our researchers, our healthcare providers, our healthcare organizations, and our educational programs and professionals. So evidently, there are a number of reasons for you not to be engaged in true, authentic patient-oriented research, and of course, one of them is a degree of tokenism, where you just engage patients ultimately because it's a checkbox that you need to fill out on your grant application. It could be a strategy for you to just create more awareness of your project and thus make the recruitment of subjects for your particular study more effective and efficient. And lastly, it might come out of good intention, but it might be solely made on the basis of just elucidating a good feeling within the research committee, that they can say, well, we had researchers we had engaged with researchers, and that's why we did our project. On the flip side, there are a number of really great reasons why you would want to engage with patients on your research projects. And principal to that would be the fact that patients provide a different perspective and help identify those areas that are of more interest to them, and perhaps that matter more to them, rather than just coming up with that eventual therapy. What are the options that are offered in between? And another good reason to engage with patients in your research process is that they can help improve how you collect data. How do you formulate your survey questions? How do you contact and reach out to your particular patient population? And patients there with their experience definitely are crucial in helping facilitate that process. And lastly, and I guess it kind of speaks to the first point, is that patients can help mitigate the focusing illusion, which ultimately is just that cognitive bias that can happen when people place too much importance on one aspect of an event. So if you don't look at the picture as a whole, and you have this bias in the back of your mind, you kind of do miss the big picture and might not be focusing really on what would matter most to your particular patient population. So in Childbright, we see patient engagement for it to be truly effective, authentic and active. For it to be truly authentic and effective, we have been promoting that we have active involvement within the various arms of our network. So that would all the way from the governance to the priority setting, to the knowledge translation committee, as you saw, and ultimately in the various aspects of conducting the research. So where can we engage patients in our projects? Well, as we alluded to in the previous slide, patients are critical in contributing to the design of individual projects. So either setting the priorities and helping define the outcomes more effectively. Those are all great opportunities for patients to be engaged. And as we just mentioned, patients are critical, can be critical in helping improve not only how you design your survey, but could be quite an essential key in helping you actually collect data through interviews. And then lastly, patients are critical to the end of your study, where it's time to interpret your results and impacting change. So patients would have that external lens to look at your data in a different way, and ultimately they would be their own advocates, and they would be quite effective in helping promote really good healthcare policy changes. That leads us to our citizen engagement channel. And ultimately, I guess as you would have gleaned from the previous slide, its main purpose is to guide all the various facets of child rights activities. In terms of the membership, again, we have a really great and diverse group of researchers, patients, and family members who are quite committed and provide rather crucial input. And in terms of where they sit in the governance structure of child rights, it reports to our main network steering committee, where the chair of the council is a chair of that committee. So in terms of what the council has been up to in the last year, they've provided some crucial input on the design and content of the website, on our reports that we put out to the community, and they were critical in helping design and drive how we designed our annual conference. And a really critical and I guess difficult area that we were focusing on as well is how do we compensate patients for their input, and they were really crucial in helping draft that sort of procedure. And then lastly, I guess not lastly, they provide input on helping us helping the network design this process for recruiting patients and matching them with available opportunities throughout the network. And going back to the idea of reporting, the council or the patient engagement committee was really crucial in helping sort of sort out and decide on some key metrics that we as a network should monitor to gauge the effectiveness of our efforts to engage patients. And then lastly, they were crucial in hiring a parent-peer mentor, which will serve a crucial role in the network to help guide parents and patients who are involved in the various research projects and serve as a really good resource to them. And I guess we will, and I guess one thing to keep in mind, in order for you to have really effective patient engagement, some key factors to keep in mind is how inclusive you are, who's not at the table, who are you not including. Be flexible, be tolerant, be respectful, and be persistent. So I know that was quite a rapid fire through those three programs, but there definitely are a variety of ways that anyone can become more involved within the network. So of course, please, we'd love your input by providing input on our research projects. You can join a research team, connect with any of our network programs if anything is of interest to you. You can feel free to participate or help lead future strategic research projects. And your input really is crucial in helping us prioritize what sort of training opportunities we offer, where we offer them, and what we focus on. And then crucially, it's great to know what you don't know. So if we can get any input on unmet needs that are out there, that would really help us steer our programs more effectively to rise to that challenge and meet that need. So yeah, that brings us to the end. So feel free to connect with us, sign up for our newsletter, and if you so wish, you can reach out to any of the program coordinators listed on the slide.
Okay, Pat, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Dan and Pierre. Really appreciate that. There's there were a few of us here in the West Broadway office of the BC Support Unit listening in. We were sidebarring while you were presenting, saying, hey, we're learning a lot about this network. So thank you very much, both of you, for taking the time to do this. I know if we're learning a lot, and we're funded by the SPOR initiative, that those who have tuned in and who watch the recording will likewise learn a lot. So I'm just going to unmute everybody to see if there are any questions for Dan and Pierre. Your mics are now unmuted. You can either ask a question using your microphone, and Kent, I see your hand is up, or you can use the chat function, which is located in the top right-hand area of your screen. Kent, please.
Yes, it is. Hi, Dan. It's nice to see you virtually again. I think we first met during the KT workshop for the support unit, and we've crossed paths a couple of times at other conferences since then. I have three main things that I noted down during that very, very information-heavy presentation, and you can respond as much or as little as you like. But early on in the presentation, I noticed that you seem to intentionally avoid using the term neurological in favor of brain-based, and other than just as a support to general comprehensibility, is that more specifically because you have avoided spinal cord conditions like spina bifida or spinal cord injury with these projects? And then, okay, and I'll just run through my three questions, and then you can take your pick of however much you want to say about each one. Secondly, I noticed that somewhere in there was a study of genetic factors in neurological conditions, and I wonder if there's any chance any of that has looked at the increasing body of evidence around the heritability of cerebral palsy, because I'm interested in that, and I have done some reporting on that topic. Also, my last of my three points was just also around the area of transitional care, specifically as regards adolescent into adult care, because that is one of many things that I have also covered on a related research project, and it's one of the things that I teach in my clinical education sessions with Vancouver Coastal Health. So whatever you would like to say about any of those things, I welcome your input now.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Ken, and good to see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah, so the neurological versus brain-based, I think we had to draw some artificial lines, and in that many of our programs were towards mental health. We sort of stuck with the brain. I think you're absolutely right that things like spinal cord injury or spina bifida, could have been also included, and I think are included in these programs by the nature of the other ways that we approach them. So, it was sort of titling and circling and putting a proposal forward to CIHR that would be met with kudos. So I think we could say neurological, but brain-based is where our real strength is, I'd say. The second question about genetic factors is, of course, great interest to me. And the heritability of CP is a fascinating question. One of the problems is that because of its incidence is low, it's hard to get really strong numbers on heritability. But we know, for examples, that there are individuals who have given birth to multiple kids impacted by CP. For example, the 3-to-B foundation or former foundation and also Neil Young, I think, is an example of this. So we can start approaching that issue. We have a registry that we're developing in another corner of the woods, and I think it really is to unroll the genetic factors that are key to CP. And your third question about transitional care, it sounds like you need to join us, Ken, in terms of being an advocate and a patient who helps guide our work, because this is a key issue and that we're approaching. And I think we don't have the BC connection as much as we would like. It's more towards Ontario and Quebec. But yes, this is something that is dear to my heart. I think it's hugely important. It's sort of moving us forward in this longitudinal course to ultimately what could be the best outcomes is to approach transition care in a meaningful way.
Thank you so much for that, and I'd be happy to connect offline to discuss more detailed opportunities for involvement.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. And any other questions from the audience today? Just take a look and see if any hands are raised. Seeing none then, Dan and Pierre, thank you once again for your time today. We really appreciate it. We'll be happy to get the link to the recording of this up on our website, out in our biweekly newsletter, and circulated via social media, including Facebook and Twitter. So we'll make sure that everyone who needs to know knows that this recording is available for those who want to learn more about the Child Right Network. So thank you so much, both of you, and a pleasant weekend to all.
Okay, great, and thanks for the opportunity. This is wonderful.
Thanks. Bye now.
Bye-bye.